The summer of 1940 did not arrive gently over Britain. It came with a distant, growing hum, engines forming somewhere beyond the Channel, followed by the sharp rise of air raid sirens echoing through streets that had only just begun to understand the reality of war. Shopkeepers paused mid-task, factory workers stood still, and families instinctively looked to the sky. Above them, dark formations of German bombers advanced with discipline and intent. And rising to meet them, often first and in greater numbers than any other British fighter, was the steady and dependable Hawker Hurricane. It was not the fastest aircraft in the sky, nor the most elegant, nor the one that would later dominate popular memory. Yet in that moment, when Britain stood uncertain and exposed, it became something far more important. It became a shield. A constant. A quiet defender whose greatest strength was not immediately visible, but deeply rooted in its design and purpose. And that hidden strength would shape the outcome of one of history's most decisive air battles. To understand how the Hurricane came to carry such responsibility, one must return to the uncertain years of the 1930s. Europe was still recovering from the economic devastation of the Great Depression, and while daily life slowly stabilized, political tensions were rising beneath the surface. Germany, under Adolf Hitler, was rearming rapidly, investing heavily in a modern air force that would soon become a central instrument of war. Britain, meanwhile, faced a more complicated reality. Public opinion remained cautious about another conflict, government spending was limited, and the Royal Air Force was in urgent need of modernization. The challenge was not simply to design a better aircraft, it was to produce one quickly, efficiently, and in numbers large enough to matter. This pressure shaped the thinking of aircraft designer Sidney Cam and the Hawker engineering team. Rather than pursuing radical or experimental designs, Cam focused on refinement. The Hurricane was conceived as a practical solution, a fighter that could be built using existing manufacturing techniques while still incorporating key modern improvements. Its structure combined a metal framework with fabric-covered sections, a method already well understood by the workforce. Its wings, however, were more advanced, designed to carry a heavier armament that would prove decisive in combat. Powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the Hurricane possessed solid performance, but more importantly, it was reliable. This combination of old and new created an aircraft that could be produced rapidly without sacrificing effectiveness. It was not a leap into the future, it was a careful, calculated step forward. And in the years that followed, that decision would prove critical. When the Second World War began in 1939, the Hurricane was already entering service in meaningful numbers. By the time the Battle of Britain unfolded in the summer of 1940, it made up the majority of RAF Fighter Command's operational fighters. This numerical presence alone gave it strategic importance, but its real value went deeper. The Hurricane's design made it a stable and predictable platform in the air, allowing pilots to aim with greater confidence. Armed with multiple machine guns mounted in its wings, it could deliver sustained bursts of fire powerful enough to break apart enemy bombers. Its wide-set landing gear made takeoffs and landings more forgiving, an essential quality during a time when many pilots were young, inexperienced, and trained under intense time pressure. Yet perhaps its most important feature was something less visible: its resilience. The Hurricane could take damage and keep flying. Where more delicate aircraft might fail, it endured. Bullets could tear through its fabric-covered surfaces, but these areas could be repaired quickly by ground crews using straightforward methods. Entire sections could be patched overnight, returning the aircraft to service by morning. In a battle defined by constant pressure and limited resources, this ability to recover and return to combat again and again became invaluable. It was not just about performance in the air, it was about sustainability over time. Still, the Hurricane was not without its flaws. Against the German Messerschmitt Bf 109, it lacked speed and struggled in certain high-altitude engagements. Its earlier construction methods, while practical, made it more vulnerable to fire. As the war progressed and technology advanced rapidly, these limitations became increasingly apparent. But rather than rendering the aircraft obsolete in its moment of greatest need, these weaknesses helped define how it would be used. RAF strategy adapted accordingly. Hurricanes were often directed toward bomber formations, the primary threat to Britain's cities, while more agile fighters engaged enemy escorts. This division of roles allowed the Hurricane to operate where it was most effective, focusing on the targets that mattered most. For the pilots who flew it, the Hurricane inspired a different kind of confidence. It was not admired for elegance, but respected for reliability. Many pilots later described how the aircraft gave them a sense of control in situations that otherwise felt overwhelming. It responded predictably, handled damage with surprising tolerance, and, in many cases, brought them home when survival seemed uncertain. In the skies above Britain, where every mission carried real risk, that reliability created a bond between pilot and machine. On the ground, the emotional weight of each returning aircraft was just as significant. Families waited for news, scanning the skies or listening for updates, hoping that loved ones would return safely. Each landing represented not just a tactical success, but a deeply personal one. The Hurricane's impact extended beyond the battlefield. For Hawker aircraft, its success reinforced the value of practical engineering and dependable design. It proved that effectiveness in real-world conditions mattered more than theoretical superiority. The lessons learned through its development influenced future aircraft, shaping a philosophy that would guide British aviation through the rest of the war. Without the Hurricane's contribution, the trajectory of Hawker as a company, and perhaps the broader structure of British aircraft production, might have been very different. One of the most defining moments in the Hurricane's history came on September 15, 1940. On that day, large-scale German air attacks were launched against Britain in what would become a turning point in the Battle of Britain. Hurricanes played a central role in intercepting bomber formations, engaging them directly and contributing to significant losses for the attacking force. The intensity of the fighting demonstrated that Britain could resist sustained aerial assault. In the days that followed, Germany reconsidered its strategy, delaying and eventually abandoning plans for invasion. While many factors contributed to this outcome, the consistent presence of the Hurricane in the skies was among the most important. As the war continued, the Hurricane adapted to new roles and new environments. It was deployed in North Africa, where it operated in harsh desert conditions, and in other theaters where its durability proved valuable. It was modified for ground attack missions, carrying bombs and rockets, and earning a reputation for versatility. In these roles, it continued to serve effectively, even as newer aircraft began to take over the role of frontline air superiority fighter. Over time, however, technological progress moved forward. Faster, more advanced designs emerged, and the Hurricane gradually stepped back from its original position at the front. By the end of the war, its role had diminished, and by 1947, its operational service came to a close. Many aircraft were dismantled or scrapped as part of post-war reductions. Yet some were preserved, recognized for their historical importance. Today, a small number of Hurricanes remain in museums and private collections, restored with care and flown occasionally as living reminders of a pivotal era. They stand not as relics of outdated technology, but as symbols of endurance and purpose. The true strength of the Hurricane was never defined by speed, appearance, or innovation alone. It was defined by its ability to meet the demands of its time. It could be built quickly when urgency mattered most. It could be repaired when survival depended on it. It could continue flying when conditions were at their worst. This combination of qualities formed its secret strength, a strength not immediately visible, but deeply effective. Today, when reflecting on the events of 1940, it is easy to focus on the more celebrated symbols of that era. Yet the story of the Hawker Hurricane offers a different perspective. It reminds us that history is not shaped only by what stands out, but also by what remains steady under pressure. In the quiet persistence of its design and the reliability of its service, the Hurricane played a role that was both essential and enduring. And in that legacy, there is a quiet truth. Sometimes, the greatest strength is not found in being the most advanced or the most admired, but in being the one that endures when everything else is uncertain.